to just begin by saying it's really an honor to be here. I'm grateful for the invitation and for you guys. I suppose you didn't pick to listen to me, but you came here, even in the midst of the tube strike and everything. So that's a version of choosing to come listen to me. It really is an honor to be here. I'm doing a lot of ministry in the UK, but I've been really looking forward to this particular event. Because I'm in a room here, I know, with a lot of pastors and church leaders. And I well know that this has been a really intense stretch for us. And so maybe I just want to start at the beginning here by saying thank you for hanging in there these last 2 years. And thank you for staying in the game enough to choose to keep investing in yourself at events like this. Whether you're here in the room, you're joining us online. Not sure what the statistics would be here in the UK. I know in the United States, 35% of pastors at this point are seriously looking or already planning to exit ministry as a career. 35%, over a full third. And that's, of course, 35% of the pastors that are still in the ministry. There's a bunch that have already left over the last couple of years. I don't know the numbers. I hope they're not quite as dire here as they are in the States. But I know this has been really hard. It's been really hard. None of us in this room, unless you were called to ministry and signed up in the last 18 months or so, none of us are doing the job that we signed up for. Right? We didn't sign up to figure out COVID logistics. We didn't sign up to navigate ever-changing government regulations. We didn't sign up to wrestle with the level of questions that we're having to wrestle with as organizational leaders. We weren't well equipped. Nobody went to seminary and was trained how to pastor through a global pandemic. We are thinking on our feet, and it's hard. And I just want to say, if you're tired, it's understandable. If you wrestle with discouragement, so does everyone else in this room right now. And I think in moments like this, the measure is not, are you doing awesome? Because if we're honest, nobody's doing awesome. The question is, are you still in the fight? Are you still putting one foot in front of the other, even when it feels hard? And you are, or you wouldn't be here. So I want to say thank you for that. This morning, as we talk, I want to spend some time reflecting a little bit on what it's like to follow God through really turbulent, strange times. When everything is dissonant and everything is changing and everything is unexpected, our job is different. Can I rotate this and sort of do this? Is that okay? Okay, I'll feel a little better. I don't like the barrier. It's like I need that to hold my things, but I don't want to feel it barrier between me and you guys. When everything is changing, everything is swirling, and, the last 2 years I feel like have certainly kind of accentuated that sense of change. But if we're really honest with ourselves, it's not that COVID has been 100% of that. Change just feels like it's accelerating perpetually in our life, doesn't it? I mean, it's like the change itself is changing. We used to have to deal with change, now we have to deal with changing change. And the whole thing, just the pace of all of it just feels like it's accelerating. I know I feel almost this sense of what's the next thing gonna be, I'm almost perpetually tentative at this point. We flew over about a week ago. We landed and flipped our phones back on and started hitting news headlines. Putin's rolling into the Ukraine, happened on the flight. And to me, it was just sort of symbolic of this is what it's like to live in this time right now. You're just kind of perpetually being bombarded. I pray that COVID is sort of on the way out, that this season will hopefully require less and less of the kind of COVID footwork that we've had to do for the last couple of years. I'm loving being in a country where I don't have to wear a mask everywhere. My understanding is when I go back to the States, I think some things will be lessened there as well. That'll be great. So I'm praying that will be, kind of that box starting to be ticked off, as it were. But I don't think that the season of lots of change is going to be over. We have a long period of time of our economies recovering, whatever that all means. We have to navigate things like a whole lot of people who got real comfortable doing what I call Netflix church, and whatever that's supposed to mean for our congregations and us as spiritual leaders now. There are all kinds of things going on, and the swirl of change I don't think is going anywhere. And so I want to just think about that. What does it look like to follow God in those times? What does it look like to lead in those times? Because leading is different in times like that than in times of a little more stability and a little more predictability. And to begin to explore that, I want to look at two terms in the Greek in the New Testament. Don't worry, we won't be doing too much Greek here. Some of you just had a little of a tick that popped up there, and that's okay if that's the case. These are probably terms you've heard before, but in case you haven't, there's two terms, at least two terms. There's far more than two, actually, but there's at least two terms in the New Testament that are distinct terms that refer to sort of different qualities of time. And I think as we reflect on this, I think we'll see that these two qualities of time are really different, and we've sort of, in a historical way, moved from one quality to the other. And a lot of what we're grappling with is how to navigate that change. These two terms are the terms chronos and kairos. Chronos refers to what we tend to think of when we think of time. When I'm looking at the screen in the back there with my counting down for how long I have left to keep trying to squeeze one more joke in and whatever, that's a chronos period of time. If we're measuring it in minutes, if we're looking at clocks, if we are doing the normal kind of linear start, progress through 5%, 10%, 15%, to the end of something, we are measuring something in chronos. In Matthew 2:7, just an example, Herod summons the wise men, and he secretly ascertains for them what chronos, what time the star had appeared. What day did that show up? September the whatever. He's inquiring of something that could be put on a calendar. Or a diary, I suppose. I think that's what you guys call that. Is that right? Have I got that right? I'm still trying to piece it together. If you put it in your diary, it's chronos time. The other kind of time is what we would call kairos time. And kairos time refers to a divine or an appointed time. Kairos times are the sort of pregnant moments. They're the moments when God steps into the timeline and God starts doing his God thing. In Matthew 8:29, Jesus is preaching, and as he's preaching, a demon manifests, and they have this sort of little bit of back and forth in front of everybody in the synagogue. And the demon, it says the demon cries out, oh, no, sorry, this is a different time. It's another time he's arguing with a demon, not then, but you get the point. The demon cries out, "What have you to do with us, O Son of God? Have you come here to torment us before the kairos, before the time?" And the idea of a kairos moment is it's a divine appointment. It's a sovereign time. It's a time when God is stepping into history. Where chronos is measured in minutes, kairos is measured in moments, right? And we've all had these times. We've had these times when, we wind up going to a meeting and God unexpectedly meets us in a way where we go, oh my goodness, that experience changed the trajectory of my life. I know there's probably not a person in this room that hasn't had some version of that, or you wouldn't be in this room. Somehow God stepped into your timeline, he gripped your life, and he began to steer you along a path that perhaps you never anticipated. I know at least that was my version of it. We have chronos and we have kairos. Now, one of the things that's really important for us as believers is to learn how to navigate both of these well with God. What I have experienced is that most people tend to prefer one over the other. And it depends on your wiring and on your personality. Many typical, and now I know this is a room in which many of us have a title that's pastor, but many people who are pastoral in their wiring, not everyone who has the title pastoral is pastoral in their wiring. God calls many different people to lead churches, right? But the people who are truly pastoral in their wiring tend to love chronos and feel uncomfortable with kairos. Chronos is very stable. It's very dependable. We can set up expectations so that people will know, oh, when I come here, this is what will happen. We can feel safe. We can let our guard down. We can take the time to have the sort of relationships in which we can open up and we can trust and we can negotiate many good and many important things in that space. And so people who are wired particularly pastorally, and there's some variant for other wirings too, but I'm just choosing that as a clear thing that we probably all can think of. People who are wired pastorally tend to love chronos, and kairos tends to make them feel kind of uncomfortable. It's like, oh, things are changing. Oh no, what's going to happen, and how is this going to affect me, and how is this going to affect other people, and how are they going to feel about the fact that none of our expectations of what we thought was going to happen is going to happen now. And so pastorally wired people tend to love chronos and feel a bit uncomfortable with kairos. Prophetically wired people tend to be the other way around. Prophetically wired people spend their whole life wishing every moment was kairos. And sometimes forcing every moment to be kairos. You know what I'm talking about? Where, we could be sitting there, we're just having a nice meal, and it's good, and we're interacting, and it's warm, and they're trying to make something happen, they're like, no, let's do this, let's all, we're enjoying fellowship, and it's good, and they're like, so let's stop that, let's get on our knees, let's pray, let's, declare, let's whatever it is. Prophetic people tend to love kairos and feel uncomfortable with chronos because it feels boring, or it feels ineffective, or some version of something like this. But God is in both, as we know. It's not that one is good and the other is bad, it's that they're different from one another. And God truly values and uses the both of them, just as the pastoral gift is a true gift from God, and the prophetic gift is also a true gift from God. We live with a God, we walk with a God who defies being put in any one category, don't we? He loves these beautiful mixtures, he loves these tensions. And so what we need to learn to do is to figure out how we as believers, and particularly, us in this room who are leaders, it's really, really valuable to learn how to walk with God through both of these. Now, here's the proposal that I want to put in front of us this morning that we can continue our time wrestling with. We are probably familiar with the idea of any given experience of life might align itself a little more with a chronos experience where it's just kind of the normal rhythms of life, or a kairos experience where it feels like God steps in and something happens. But the truth is, it's not just moment by moment that these things happen. There's also windows of history that slide more towards chronos or more towards kairos. If we look at the scriptures, and you consider, for example, the whole saga that happens with Moses and the Exodus and the wandering through the wilderness and the coming to the promised land, there is something about that window of time which goes quite a long time, 40 years, in which God seems to have his hands directly on the Israelites in kind of a unique way. I mean, he shows up, he decimates the world power of the day. I mean, if we think about it, Pharaoh's maybe not too far from Putin in terms of the situation that's happening here. Egypt is the world despotic leader of the time, right? Moses gets summoned to go in and say, hey, Putin, let my people go. And Pharaoh responds about how you'd expect Putin to respond. And then Moses proceeds, of course, God, through Moses, proceeds to unleash 10 plagues that decimate Egypt economically, financially, militarily, and in every other way. And so the Israelites leave Egypt having destroyed the world empire of the day. I mean, it's incredibly dramatic. They proceed from that to literally meet with God on a mountain that looks like it's exploding because of his presence, and then follow him day by day for 40 years with a visible cloud and visible fire. This is not our normal everyday lives. There's not a whole lot of chronos happening here. There's a whole window of kairos that's going down. But once they begin to cross into the promised land, a lot of that kind of begins to fall off, and there's a window of chronos time. And there's actually hundreds and hundreds of years in there where the majority of what's happening is people are kind of going about their everyday life. They're building their homes, they're sowing their fields, they're growing their families, they're doing all of these good and beautiful things. And then we come to kind of another chronos, or another kairos window, when we come probably to Samuel and David and Saul and that whole story. It's like all of a sudden, God's like really on the move again in dramatic ways. And then, things kind of go sour for a little while, and there's not a lot happening. And then we come to Elijah and Elisha and kind of the era of the prophets that are kind of dramatic for a little while, and then it cools down again for a little while. And then eventually we come to Jesus and John the Baptist and the apostles, and it's like, boom, this explosion, and sort of cools down. You see the pattern here. The scriptures tell a story of not just moment by moment chronos or kairos, but almost sort of eras of chronos or kairos. It might be that we live in a time that over the, last 25, 50 years, we've come through a period of time that might have best been measured as a chronos period into a kairos period. I think the reason that we feel the swirl of change is because the world is really changing. And we, for better or for worse, as spiritual leaders, probably need to learn how to spiritually lead in a kairos era. And the challenge is we've probably all been trained to lead and signed up to lead in a chronos mindset and a chronos set of tools. And so we find ourselves a little bit, at times, unequipped for the job. What does it look like to do this stuff in a kairos era? Well, one of the places I have found to be greatly helpful, and I'll teach a few, or we'll extract a few lessons from this morning, but I'll share this as something that I would suggest you might consider further study of your own in this. Is I've found the period of time when God guides the Israelites through the wilderness to be a really helpful metaphor for our time. There's something about that sort of like resonates with me. They wind up having this nomadic experience with God, where they follow him in territory they've never been before and will never go back to again. And I have to figure out, how do we be the people of God in times like this? And so I've been studying that a lot. I've been learning a lot myself. I would encourage you guys may also extract your own lessons with the Lord if you take the time to look at that in this season. One of the things that stood out to me as I began to dive into that and kind of wrestle through that is that the way rhythms work and the way priorities work change a lot in a kairos season. In the chronos season, how do you get your provision? You probably build it yourself. When God brings the Israelites into the promised land, he says, I want you to sow fields. Eat from the vineyards that are planted. Build yourself homes. There's this idea of planting yourself, rooting yourself, establishing yourself, creating these predictable rhythms, these predictable structures that we know can get us the resources that we need to be able to receive. All of this works if you're in a chronos time. But when you're in a kairos time, all of that goes out the window. The Israelites are not planting farms as they make their way around the wilderness. They're not building houses at every stop that God brings them to. They wind up adopting a different kind of lifestyle. And it's challenging and it's hard, but what happens is that in it, God actually draws closer to them and gets more hands-on with the provision that they need. In the promised land, there's a kind of general expectation that they'll work with the soil to provide their own food. In the wilderness, God says, I'm going to give you bread from heaven directly. In the promised land, they're responsible to build their own houses, to make their own clothes and that kind of thing. In the wilderness, God says, I'll make sure your clothes never wear out. Isn't that a weird promise? The thing I've always wondered, just an aside, the thing I've always wondered is how flexible was that? So if I'm born and I grow, did my clothes grow with me? You know? Because if the idea is that you won't need to keep getting sets of clothes, that would be kind of cool. Or it would actually be maybe disappointing, if whatever I'm wearing when I'm 5 is the same outfit I'm wearing at 90, and it just kind of stretched somehow and whatever. I don't know how that works, right? But the point is that God gets more hands-on on his provision for us. We as spiritual leaders need to be able to somehow wrestle to the ground the expectation of where our direction and where our provision is going to come from. See, in a chronos time, if you don't plan well, and if you don't take care of things according to wisdom and according to the way of things, and you don't have food, then first of all, it's on you. And second of all, it's possible that God would step in and provide for you. But in times of chronos, God stepping in directly is rather infrequent. In kairos, you're not going to be able to get your own food. It's not possible. God's got to give you the food directly. But what can happen is this. If I'm used to this chronos lifestyle, where I'm used to growing my own food, I can point to it. That looks like a good plant. That's going to give me a good pepper in a few months. So I feel safe because I can see the food that's coming. If that's my expectation, and if my expectation is I need to be wise and responsible, which is good, please don't hear me knocking wise and responsible. Please don't hear that, okay? But I need to be wise and responsible, and I need to partner with the ways of the Lord to provide for myself, in a way. And then I find myself in a territory where the plan has changed. The expectation has changed. God is now not expecting me to grow my own food. But if I'm expecting to grow my own food, and if I am of the mindset that if I don't grow my own food, I'm being irresponsible, and God probably won't show up and help me out, then I'm going to spend this kairos period of time panicking. I'm going to be freaking out. And it's unfortunate because God has a different set of expectations for this time. God doesn't have that expectation of me, but I might because that's what I'm used to. In times of kairos, God is intensely predictable and dependable when it comes to his provision. You guys probably know that the Israelites were estimated to be on the order of 1 million people when they left Egypt, and sort of somewhere on the order of perhaps up to 5 million people when they came in to the Promised Land. So I can't do this math in my head, but let's split the difference between those two because we're looking over 40 years. So let's just do this. 3 million people times 40 years times 365 daily portions. How many portions of provision is that for the Israelites that God gives? It's billions. It's like 50 billion or more. 50 billion daily portions delivered, and God never misses a single one. That's the way God provides in times of kairos. He is intensely predictable and intensely faithful if you'll get it from him directly. But if we're over here freaking out because we're not farming and going, I don't know if God's going to give me a daily portion if I can't provide it for myself, then I panic for every portion. I panic every day. And meanwhile, God's like, I got 50 billion of them. I didn't miss the Israelites for a generation. I'm not going to miss you. It's okay. I've got your back. The expectation has changed a bit. And what winds up happening on the whole, as it comes to these kairos times, is God changes things a little bit. He changes the equation, as it were, and he says, you know, the real point of this season is this. You're going to get everything from me directly, and the only lesson that exists in this season is trust. You know, in the times of chronos, you can build yourself a map. You can walk in all the different directions, and you can get a sense of, here's the territory that I'm in. That's a good place to grow. There's already some apple trees growing over there. You know, I can go wash my clothes in that river. You know, that's kind of a rocky place over there that must probably dangerous. So probably avoid that. We can get a sense of a lay of the land. We can build ourselves a map. You can't build a map in times of kairos because you're following God through the wilderness. Every stop is a stop that you've never been to before and you'll never go to again. And God knows what's around every bend. God knows the rivers over there. God knows those mountains over there have bad animals to avoid or whatever it is. God knows every single one of those details, but we are probably not going to know them. We're in times of kairos. And so what we wind up doing is we have to work and partner with God and walk on what feels like a really short leash sometimes, where it's like we get everything directly from God, and we feel, on the whole, most of the time, like I'm in the dark. I don't know what I'm doing. I just know that this was the next step that God gave me. See, God is brilliant at knowing precisely about 1 trillion variables that you and I can never see. I love that story when Paul's on I believe it's his second missionary journey, and he's gone through Galatia. He's encouraged the churches that he planted on his last missionary journey. And now that he's like encouraged them and he's supported them, he's like, okay, now it's time to expand. So you know what Paul's doing? He's thinking strategically. He says, I have a base of operations in Galatia. I've just been there. The churches are doing okay. You know, it would be really smart to take one adjacent step somewhere. So he goes to one adjacent province to Galatia, and God says, don't go there. And he goes to another one, and God says, nope. And he tries a third one, and God says, nope. So he goes a little farther away, and God says, keep going. And he wanders hundreds of miles across modern-day Turkey, and God says, you're finally almost there. Cross over into Greece. Now, you and I look at that and we go, strategically, that's a really bad move. You have a base of operations. You have resources. Write the 5-year plan, right? Plant however many churches in these communities. And, you know, like we can, but God's like, nope. In fact, why don't you go 400 miles that direction where there's no resources and no churches and no leaders and nothing makes sense, but actually that'll be perfect. And so God gives him a dream. But you know what happens? For 300 miles, Paul wanders around confused, hearing no, 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 no. That must have not been a fun 6 months. Right? I mean, we read it in 2 verses. So we think it happened in an afternoon. Right? But hundreds of miles, probably mostly on foot. Didn't happen quickly. Right? Paul must have been awful confused. But it turned out that Greece opened up churches that took the whole thing to a level far beyond what he would have anticipated in like 8 different directions and ways. This is how God leads in these kairos moments. We often feel confused. We often feel like, God, if only you would show me the bigger picture. And what God is thinking is like, you don't know that what's actually the best strategic step is 500 miles in the next country over, and doesn't look like it makes any sense from where you're sitting, but is actually a brilliant step. So you can't have the map for all that. You've never been there. You don't even know who those people are, what their culture is like. You don't know the things they're wrestling with. But why don't you just trust me and be willing to wander through a little bit of murkiness, a little bit of fuzziness, and then you'll see, oh, I knew exactly what I was doing. In these times of kairos, everything is swirling, everything is changing, and our leadership has to actually shift a little bit away from great planning and great executing, although I love a plan. I love all of that. Like, I often do strategic thinking at the churches that I'm at. Like, I have a Ph.D. in physics. I love strategy, okay? So don't hear me downplaying strategy. I'm saying the time of the season, following God looks a lot more step by step. And acting as a spiritual leader looks probably a lot less like constructing a brilliant 5-year plan and a lot more like modeling the same step-by-step walk that every single person in every single one of our churches is also struggling with in every part of their life. It might be that what they really need right now is to be able to look at you and to see someone who can say, yeah, I have no idea what I'm doing either. But I'm pretty sure that God said to do that, and I don't know why. And if I'm honest, I'm a little scared too. But I know him a little bit too. And the little bit that I've known him says, that's probably going to work out pretty well. So even though I'm scared, I'm going to give it a try. And we're going to see what he does. It might be that that's the kind of leadership our people need right now. The kind of leadership that when the tent or when the cloud lifts off the tent and starts moving, we as leaders don't try and plan, we just try and move. We just say, all right, guys, time to pack up. Let's get going. Well, where are we going? What are we going to do? Follow God? No, but really, what are we going to do? I don't know, follow God. But don't you have more than that? Actually, I don't. Turns out you don't need more than that. That's actually what spiritual leadership looks like in this season. And if we're willing to walk that way, you know what's the incredible thing? Is in kairos times. So here's what protects you in a chronos time. What protects you is you build this kind of stable core, and the further you wander out, things get sort of dangerous out there. But we can build this kind of sense of safety and stability. And so we try and stay towards the center, and we wander, but we try not to wander too far. In times of kairos, there is no time to build a stable core. And what keeps you safe is your proximity to God's presence. Why did God show up as a cloud in the wilderness during the day and a fire by night? Probably about 8 reasons. God's really clever and can stitch things together in creative ways. But I'd submit to you one of them might be this. A desert in the Middle East can get extraordinarily hot during the day and can drop below freezing at night. What do you need if you're trucking around with 2.5 million people, some of them old, some of them young children? You need something to take the heat off during the day. You need something to keep the camp warm at night. Proximity to God's presence is what makes the inhospitable environment of the wilderness safe for you. And so when God starts moving, it's not just I should follow him. It's, if I stay in this tent and he gets too far down the road, I might die. Because it's his presence that's protecting me. So when the cloud moves, I move. Because I don't want to get sunburnt. When the cloud moves, I move because I don't want to freeze to death at night. And so when we are in these times of kairos, we're in the wilderness. It feels like danger's all over the place. It feels like I don't know what's behind that bush, but it's certainly not good. Or anyone at the point where we're still expecting positive surprises? I passed that one a long time ago. All I expect is negative surprises. I'm like, this is scary territory. It's how close I can stay to God's leading, moment by moment, day by day. That's what keeps me safe. Is it consistent? Well, his character's consistent, so in a way, yes. But it's going to feel different every day. Because God's different every day. Right? It's that strange paradox of he's the same yesterday, today, and forever, and he's always doing a new thing at the same time. But this is the God that we walk with. Walk real close to him in this season. We can navigate these times of kairos. You know, the thing, maybe this will be my last point, and we'll take a bit of time to minister to one another, pray, and so forth. The other thing about moments of kairos is this. They're hard, but they're also significant. How much time, when we think of the scriptures, whatever immediately comes to mind, I give it 95% guess, you're thinking of one of those kairos windows. You go, what's your favorite passage in the Bible? What's your favorite period of time in the Bible? Nobody goes, period of Judges. It's great. Totally fantastic. I really like that exile period where they're in Babylon. There's not much going on. We don't, like the moments where the narrative of God accelerates forward happen in the turbulent moments of kairos. So I get that we're exhausted. I'm exhausted too. I get that we're change weary. I get all those things. That's real. But we're also living in a time, I believe, of divine significance, where what we do matters now. Not to say it didn't matter before. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is, I think like when we get to the finish line of eternity and we look back on our lives, we're going to be asking the questions, when we were in this moment, when everything in the world went crazy, but God was on the move. Did we get distracted by the world? Or were we faithful to follow God in the midst of it? I think that's what the jewels in our crown look like. They're questions like that. What we're doing right now, super hard. Do we have any clue how to navigate through this? No, I don't. I'm sorry if you came to this talk expecting some answers for that. The only answer I have is that I do know the guy who does know. And it turns out we can trust him. We can follow him. Day by day, step by step, he'll bring us through. He's pretty good. He's been doing it for a while. So let's do this. Can we take a bit of time and just pray into that? Is that okay? What I would love to do is I'd love, if we're willing, can we all just stand? I'd like to kind of sort of pray over the group. And, if you're online joining us like through the stream, why not stand too? It's not going to hurt you, probably. So why don't we just stand? I want to kind of pray over the group. And we have until when? 10:30-ish? Something like that? I want to pray over us as a group for a little bit. And then what I would love to do on the far side of that is, I think what's so important for us in rooms like this is to be able to be vulnerable and honest with one another, right? There's actually a degree as spiritual leaders where complete vulnerability with the people we're leading isn't always appropriate, right? Now hopefully it's not indiscretionary and inappropriate, but it's like we need people who are gonna get it. The people in this room are gonna get it with one another. And so I'm going to pray over all of us, and then what I'd love to do is just facilitate a bit of each of us kind of praying for each other. I think that kind of support would be really valuable. So let's do this. Just go ahead and close your eyes here, and we're just going to ask the Lord to turn up his direct leadership over each of us. God, we just say, we admit, we confess, God, these are challenging times for us. God, it is confusing. We don't know how to do a lot of the things we're trying to do. But God, in the midst of all of that, we do say that we trust you. You have proven yourself faithful, God. You have proven yourself that you know the terrain, you know what to do, and you are good and willing to provide. God, just right now, I ask, would you recalibrate the expectations of our heart to expect your daily provision for us? God, that 50 billion daily portions would be the thing that sticks in our mind. Not the insecurity of, are you going to provide again? God, we just actually want to assume that you'll provide. If that's not too assumptive on you, God. We want to just take as a given that you are who you say you are. And that as our provider, you're going to give us everything that we need for the calling that you've given us to walk in this time. And so right now, first of all, I just want to bless each and every person who's experiencing this and receiving this, every person in the room, every person online. I just bless you right now, and I bless the provision of the Lord for you with everything that you need personally and everything that you need vocationally. Lord, provide for your flock. Provide for your people. I bless every church, God, that's represented right now. And we bless them to be funded, God, to have a clarity of where you're leading and guiding each one of us. We say, Lord, we need you to speak really clearly because it does confuse us. We can't see the bigger picture. But God, we do say, if you'll make the next step clear, we'll take the next step, God. If you'll get it to the point where we go, I know that's you, I know that's the next step. I don't know where it goes, I don't know why that's the next step. But God, if you give us the what, we'll obey. God, right now we just choose to give you quick and complete obedience, God. Quick and complete obedience. And just every insecurity, every fear, every way that the enemy would get in our head and the past pains or traumas of life would get in our head or anything else would get in our head. Lord, I just dispel all of that. God, you have promised us a sound mind